Welcome to the pilot episode of the Over Under. We uh, we have some distinguished guests with us: Quinn Nelson, Anshul Sag, and my colleague at Creative Strategies, Max Weinbach. So, Quinn, why don't you give a brief description of yourself, what you do, your company, and then Anshul chime in after that.
Sure. Hello, hello. I've been running the YouTube channel Snazzy Labs since 2008. We've covered consumer technology in pretty much every aspect from Apple to Android to Windows and Mac OS and networking and everything in between. And yeah, so that's what I do. and
Awesome.
some people watch.
Yeah, that's great. The YouTubes are great. Anshul?
Yeah, I'm an analyst with more insights and strategy, principal analyst at the firm, and I cover all kinds of stuff: smartphones, 5G, XR, PCs, wearables. But I also was a journalist in a previous life, so I've been covering the space for over a decade and a half.
Decade and a half. Max, briefly, who you are?
I am an analyst at Creative Strategies with Ben and cover mostly mobile, AR, VR, all the fun stuff that consumers touch.
Fun stuff. Hopefully, everybody mostly knows me, Ben Beharan of Creative Strategies, long time analyst. All right, so today's subject on the Over Under is the AR VR mixed reality space. We've all been early adopters of these products, whether it be going back into the strapping a phone to a headset face days and earlier things. I think Angel has some giant helmet that went on back in the day. Two, I'm sure we all try these kind of interesting AR glasses that try to do alternative displays from Xreal and others. So broad diverse set. But I want to start with kind of our overall experiences of a couple of these things, and let's kind of start with the leading edge devices here. So let's talk about Apple Vision Pro, Quest 3 and or 2 or 3, and then Quest Pro if you've used it. Just in terms of how these experiences compare, I think obviously we would all agree they're trying to go after different markets and they have very different philosophies. So let's sort of just launch with that. We'll go like Quinn. Why don't you kind of kick us off on your experience with these products?
Sure. I've been an enthusiast in kind of head-mounted displays since the beginning. I tried the original Oculus dev kit at CES many years ago and purchased an HTC Vive, which would have been late 2016, early 2017, I believe. So many years. And I've tried just about every headset since, including ones from weirdo companies most people have never heard of, like Pimax et al. I've spent a lot of time in virtual reality and an augmented reality, but I've admittedly probably spent more time researching and learning about the headset hardware than actually using them. And I think that's kind of been the difficulty that headsets have faced up until, still continuing on today is everyone knows that they're cool, but many headsets have found difficulty finding an application beyond enterprise and specific training applications that don't target kind of end user consumers. Consumer space VR has mostly been confined to gaming. It's done fairly well in that tiny little niche, but it's remained a very little niche. Even with Oculus, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they've sold several million, but compared to every other form of gaming, it's diminutive. I mean, it's a really small percentage of the market share. And that's what makes Apple's kind of entrance so interesting, because the hardware is not conceptually that different from anything else that's existed on the market. I own both a Quest 3. I owned a Quest Pro for a while. The hardware is very similar amongst the two, but the methodology and the approach that Apple has is different from everyone else's. I think it's more aspirational. I think it's more bold, but it also makes me wonder if it's the right choice, because in some aspects it's already been tried and failed from other companies. So
That's a good perspective. All right, Anshul, your take.
I was very disappointed with the Quest Pro. First of all, because I forked out the $1,500, and then a few months later they dropped it to $1,000. So that hurt. Um, but also like it was the first time I actually injured myself in VR. Because I'm like Quinn, I've been doing it since DK1. I have a DK1 up there hiding behind my Yoda stuff up in the rafters. So like I really am a strong believer in VR. Ironically enough, I didn't think DK1 was actually that good. I actually was convinced by the first prototypes of the Vive. So I was more in the Vive camp than I was in the Oculus camp, and we'll talk about the whole tribalism of VR later on, I'm sure. But I think that you know, the Quest Pro had a lot of good ideas, but it didn't really execute any of them particularly well, and I think that was the problem. So getting back to my injury, I hurt my neck. I couldn't do VR for 2 or 3 months because I really hurt my neck badly, and I was wearing it for like an hour, and I think I just turned my head too fast, and I pulled something, and
Mm.
it was not good. It reminded me that I'm no longer a spry chicken. Um, but yeah, I think Quest 3 um, really hit a lot of marks well for me. I think it's I like to use it a lot for fitness. I tried using the Quest Pro for fitness, doesn't work. It's really not a fit for a
Mm.
lot of reasons. It's too rigid, all those things. Quest 3 with the right straps and everything, it's actually my preferred workout. Because I don't have to like go anywhere. I can just do it at home. Um, Quest 3 set a lot of expectations. I also think Quest 3 came out fast, right? Like I think one of the problems that the Vision Pro had was we basically had to wait almost a year for it to come out, and that gave Meta a lot of time to like refine what they were doing, and get the headset out before
Hmm.
Apple did. So even though maybe Apple had already thought of some of these things and was ready to implement them, the hardware was not out and ready to go. Um, and I think when I look at the two headsets, I don't really feel like there's that much overlap between them, to be honest. I think that the Quest really executes gaming and fitness really well, while I think the Quest, the Vision Pro is very much an entertainment and productivity device, and there's very little productivity overlap between the two of them, because I feel like I can replace my computer with the Vision Pro, even though I don't have a Mac. I feel like I don't need a Mac because I get that experience in the Vision Pro. And on the Quest, I don't feel like I'm replacing any of my computers at all.
Mm.
It still feels very like gaming console experience trying to become a PC.
Mm. Okay, good points. Max, your take on a couple of these products.
All right, I used Rift S, Quest 1, Quest 2, Quest Pro, and Vision Pro. That's all the VR I've like owned. Uh, Quest 1, 2, and they were fine. It wasn't great. It was gaming headsets. Right? That was the entire purpose of it. They tried to do whatever productivity with it, but those were gaming headsets, and I kind of got away with it because Beat Saber, Pistol Whip, Saints and Sinners, those were all fun games to play on those. And I wasn't judging it too harshly because it's a console effectively. Same reason you're not judging an Xbox for frame drops every once in a while, and it was fine. Maybe the hardware was not what I would expect or want, but it was a $299, $350 headset. Who cares? Then I got the Quest Pro, and I spent the $14.99 on it, and it sat on a shelf. It's literally, I've used it maybe a grand total of 3 hours since I bought it. It is like it's a good headset, but it tries the pass through is terrible, so you can't really do AR, and if you try, you're going to get sick nearly immediately.
Right.
You can't look at your phone through it because the cameras don't work. And then it just becomes an expensive gaming console without the performance and benefits that you're paying for with it. So I didn't buy a Quest 3 because the Quest Pro just kind of ruined the Quest line for me. Sure, it was a different product category and they're trying something else, but it's just, I stopped believing in a lot of the VR AR and standalone from that until I got Vision Pro because, Vision Pro's it tries to do productivity before gaming and actually
Mm.
succeeds doing that, but the gaming on it's not great. So I think get into this later, but I think the combo of like having a Quest 3 for gaming and then a Quest Vision Pro for like productivity, great combo.
Interesting. Okay. So what changed it for me, I would say I was, out of all of you, probably the most skeptical about this category until pass through got pretty good, which happened with the Quest 3. It wasn't because I don't really care to game in it. I play PC games as my vast majority of gaming. But until like I saw a decently quality pass through, which happened with kind of Quest 3 for me. That was when I was like, all right, now I can kind of see, I can move around, I can interact with objects, seeing kind of this mixed reality experience. That was the thing that I was like, all right, a normal person can do this and actually have a good time, right? VR by itself is just isolated to a couple things, like you all talked about, games, to some degree entertainment, which I think, worked well with it. But pass through was that thing where I was like, all right, this will be an unlocking experience for the most in the mainstream. And luckily I had that experience with Quest 3 around the same time I had Apple Vision Pro experience at DubDub. And vast differences. And I do think people have brought up, well, is the pass through close enough? Because the reality is, right, in bright environments, and I will say, I think this is a caveat that not a lot of people pointed out. When we did our Apple Vision Pro demos, the lighting was impeccable. And when the lighting was impeccable, it looks like you don't see as much grain, right? Once it goes dark, you see. So I think we were subject to a quality lighting experience, which led to everybody go, man, this is the best path through. And it still is. It's better than Quest 3. But I think that's why you saw so much optimism come out of those demos. It was very bright. And so you didn't see, artifacts and graininess. But I think people would still agree, right? In general, it's a higher quality pass through. And they really nailed those spatial experiences because I can move around my house. And it doesn't say redraw your boundary, which I'm sure they'll fix, but that's super annoying, right? From a Quest perspective. But I appreciate kind of these two approaches. And I do think, what we've all kind of hit on with Apple is, they're going for, and I don't know if I'll say replace the Mac yet, but they're definitely going for use this as a companion to do things you can't do on these other platforms. And even a lot of the, remote display stuff I try with the Oculus, it's okay. Like it's not bad. Quest isn't bad, but to Anshul's point, you can really use this thing, right? With your computer, with your Mac. I think they've just landed on productivity and obviously entertainment as those two pillars. I don't think, and you can tell me if you guys agree with this, I don't think they're going to go to gaming the same way unless, again, controllers happen. And I do think controllers are necessary for a rich gaming experience. But I think that's the one thing we could all agree. If there's anything where there's a divergence at this moment, because Quest will do some of those things that I'm mentioning about Apple, but I do think this divergence is gaming. And I do think that has some really interesting implications.
I would just also add, if Apple had to kill one of its existing businesses, its PC business is the one that has the least market share and probably the lowest margin. So
yeah.
If it were to cannibalize one of its businesses, that might be the right one to do it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Please don't.
So what please don't do that. Oh yeah. I mean, remember the last time there was debated whether or not they're going to kill the Mac. People thought they gave up, and then there was a whole snafu, and it got reinvigorated. All right, so the topic of the theme for this is the over under. For everybody that's kind of watching, the reason we do that is we're going to throw out kind of either a statistic or a ask a prediction, and we're going to have our guests take the over or the under on that, and then we're going to talk about it. So we'll get some skin in the game because we're making some predictions, if you will. So it's fun, par for the course. These are the kind of things that Anshul and I get judged on regularly as analysts, to be honest with you. So that's par for the course. All right, so we'll start off with the first question. So over under on any of these products. So Apple Vision Pro, Quest 3 or 4 or 5, right? Whatever that is. Over under on any of these products reaching 20% market adoption in 5 years. And we'll start with Anshul.
When you say 20% market adoption, you mean like 20% of the whole market?
So like the way you'd think 20% of like installed base. So 20% ownership people have bought as a percentage of Yes, the whole market. So not just the United States.
Okay. I think Quest is most likely to be over 20%.
Not only of the US, not of the whole market. 10
Oh,
million
you mean
sales wouldn't be 20% in
no, no, no.
installed base, not annual sales.
Okay. Um, well, I guess I'm trying to understand which market you're referring to specifically.
Yeah, so AR, VR, like any of these headsets, like having an ownership base as a percentage of any market, right? So that we would say that it's reached 20% market adoption penetration as a whole for the market.
In the US, under 20 for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's just realistic. I mean, um, we're still very much in the uh, first of all, we're still very much in the early phases of the market, but
Very early.
also, I just think that when you look at like the best case scenario, they shipped maybe low 10 millions when they had a
Yeah.
299 price point.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's probably close to where they're going to be for the foreseeable future, best case scenario, until um, we start getting like real high quality content. Because um, I think for a game console, and even the game console companies are struggling with this, um, having content that people want drives hardware sales. And I just think that we're seeing like kind of an unbundling of the console model as the VR headsets are trying to become, console-ified, to preserve their investments in the hardware. And I just think that it's really difficult to build spatial content without scale. And it's been a problem that's plagued the VR market for a really long time, because no content developer is going to be willing to spend the money to build a AAA like title, um, and spend $100 million in development without knowing that they're going to get their money back. So I think there has to be like a reconfiguration of content, where spatial experiences are a component of it and not the complete all-encompassing. And that
Yes.
doesn't really drive market penetration until that people start actually demanding spatial content and there's more demand for it. I just don't think there's going to be as much movement in terms of units.
Yeah. So you think it'll take longer than 5 years to get to
Yeah.
20%? And just to use this as
Yep.
a SAM, just so that everybody has an actual number. So if we just thought that the addressable market was a billion people, 20% would be 200 million units. So yeah. So you're taking the over 5 years to 20%. All right, Quinn, what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Big time over. If you look at the adoption that virtual reality has had thus far, it's been very, very, very slow. Part of that is because the concept of virtual reality and head-mounted displays has been a pipe dream since
Yeah.
the 1960s. This has been something that people have talked about and wanted forever. And if you look at the advancements in technology that have happened since the original, let's use the Vive, because that I agree with
Yeah.
Anshul that was kind of the beginning of modern VR as we think about it. The displays that we have now are significantly better. We don't have screen door effect. We don't have issues with that. We now have inside out tracking that's done really reliably. The Apple Vision Pro augments things even further with like pretty good hand tracking. But if you look at the technological, what can you do with the HTC Vive relative to a Quest 3 today, the formula hasn't changed at all. It's video games, and frankly, the Vive can play every title that the Quest 3 can play today, in as much as it's available on Steam VR, right? So, the dynamics of what can you do have not really changed that much. And while the hardware has advanced, I still think that it's almost a solution looking for a market. Oculus tried fairly early on to pivot into gaming because that's what Steam VR had done. That's what the Vive was doing. Valve is absolutely dominant in the PC gaming market, and Oculus at the time didn't want to let Valve take that market once again, because they too, just like with the Vive and with the early Index, they were all PC VR, right? So this was PC gaming through a headset. The Quest flipped that formula on its head by going kind of all in one, but the applications for what that was supposed to be was the same. It was video games. And I think Meta would tell you that they're happy with the Quest's kind of market penetration, but
Sure.
it's within that very small bubble of who wants to play video games inside a headset. One of the biggest problems I think that these headsets have is their intentionality. Because putting it on is not really a small feat. I mean, you have to put it over your head, and you have to mess up your hair, and it's heavy and fairly uncomfortable, and you have big, red lines that go over your face at all times. It's not as easy as picking up a smartphone. It's not as easy as opening up a laptop lid. It takes effort, and the trade-off is, the expectation from the end user is that it's able to provide an experience that you can't really find anywhere else. I would argue that the Quest and PC gaming has achieved that. I played Half-Life Alyx. It's the best video game experience I've ever had in my life. And it's something that a 2D kind of traditional video game has never been able to replicate, hasn't replaced it. It was one of the coolest things I've ever done, where I played that game and I thought, this is the future. But I was sweaty and I needed a lot of room in my house, and I was tired because I was kneeling and getting up and down. And not that there's not an application for that, but most people that are going to play video games just want to sit on their couch and eat potato chips, right? So there is a market for this type of gaming, but it's not going to replace the entirety of gaming. And I think that is even true with the Vision Pro. It's trying to replace, in some ways, computing. And in certain aspects, it does a good job at that. But in other aspects, it doesn't. There's nothing really that I can do on my Apple Vision Pro that I can't do with my Mac and my iPhone. Not today. And until that becomes, until the form factor becomes so convenient that it's no different than pulling our phone out of our pockets and instantly scanning our faces to unlock it, and or until the things that you can do in the Vision Pro are so unique and so special that you can't get that experience everywhere else, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to consume average consumers, regardless of price, to buy into that vision. Because the Quest 3 is really not that expensive. And it's a $500 headset. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive. And the Quest 2 can be had for less. And even though they're selling them pretty much break even, in some instances, some would argue at a loss, they're still having difficulty moving units. And it's because they're inconvenient enough, and they don't offer enough in exchange for most people today to be on board with that. And until that gets resolved, I don't think that's likely to change. And the tech is still, even with the Vision Pro, just still not there yet. We need more time.
Yeah. Strong points. All right, Max, what you think? Over, under?
I think it's going to take over. So if we're going, global market, 1 billion, it's 200 million units. That's not happening in 5 years. If you go US, you could say probably, 150 to 200 million people for a total market. That's 30 to 45 million units sold. If you assume you already have 10 million with Quest from already sold, and that's probably a rough number, sell another 30 million in 5 years is not likely. Maybe a cheaper Vision Pro can get 2 or 3 million, and that's just not even maybe, but I don't think there's any sort of critical adoption, 20% market share, until you get optical AR with something in a glasses form factor. Because again, as Quinn was saying, it's hard. It is a lot of work to get into a VR headset or a Vision Pro or any of these headsets. It's just work. Even if you use the solo loop band and you're not really messing up your hair, you still have to hold the battery. You still have to not really sit at a desk, because if there's a wall, the tracking gets messed up on Vision Pro every once in a while. So you have to go into an open space, and that means walking around. It's just, it is not as convenient as a laptop. So it's hard to sell that on productivity. But when you get into optical AR, that's the thing. But that's also probably 10, 15 years out of being possible from a technical display perspective, or even compute to fit into a glasses form factor of some type of wireless communication. It's just years out. It's not going to hit. And when it does, it's kind of like a smartwatch. I think someone was saying headsets are like a computer, glasses are like a phone.
Zuckerberg said that. I think Zuck said that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. But the problem is, again, that's 10 to 15 years out at this point. And that is when that category of AR, VR, MR actually hits that 20% point. But again, that's just so far out. And there's no way Meta, Apple, Samsung said they're doing one towards the end of the year combined. sell 20 to 30 million units in the US or 190 million globally in 5. It's just, I don't think the supply chain's there to produce that many units, or the demand is there to actually have people interested in buying that many.
So I think I'd be definitely the over also. I was hoping somebody would take the under and be aggressive, but we're all too practical for that. But I think what we highlighted is two fundamental things that I think are interesting. A, it's a use case problem, as you guys have articulately put out. And then, B, there is a technology problem. There is a ability to get such a rich quality experience at a price point, at a weight, at a form factor, that's still a gigantic problem. And I think even if we just looked on the basis of, when will the technology be good enough, come down to a price point that's decent enough so that it can acquire some market share, and then we can find the use cases, that you talked about, Quinn, that get people excited to do things they've never done. It's just such a slow burn. And my biggest sort of issue here is exactly what, Quinn pointed out, is that if there was something here at $300, it should have done better. Like, it should have done better. So something has been holding people back, and we haven't unlocked that mainstream use case. And I think we're still really debating how general purpose might one of these things be. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think we will know. And if it's specific purpose, it's a much smaller market than I think any of us realize. If it's general purpose, then we're arguing, is it a PC size market? So an installed base of 1.2, 1.5 billion versus a smartphone market that's, now exceeding 4 billion. We don't know. It may be smaller. It might be in between. We have no idea, but it's going to take a really, really long time for this adoption cycle. And the reason I wanted to make this point is I just don't think people appreciate how slow this is going to go, how patient you need to be, and how much financial investment needs to be there. And we need those software developers to also, be patient to go along with that, to really carve out some of these things. So it's a good topic there. I would say, though, it's likely we could do this in less than 10 years. Would you guys think it shouldn't take more than 10 years to hit 20% penetration? Anshul's like, well, maybe. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. In 2016, I was like, yeah, 10 years sounds reasonable. We're 2 years from that
Yeah,
10-year
you're right.
mark. So I don't feel like, and maybe the reason why I'm thinking that is because I'm like, another 10 years, maybe not, but certainly 5 years feels too soon, considering how far we've gotten in almost 10 years.
That's very true. Very true. Okay, let's jump to the next question, which will be a rich discussion, because it will also be philosophical and us interpreting company strategies, namely named Apple and Meta. So, over under that Meta will open up their operating system, their fork of Android, to other hardware partners other than themselves, meaning someone else not named Meta can build a Quest-like product with what I'm just loosely calling Quest OS, in case it doesn't have a name, in the next 12 months. We'll start with Quinn.
I'm going to go over on this one too. I think it will likely happen eventually. I'm not bullish on it happening in the next year. You had Zuckerberg in that video he did comparing the Quest to the Apple Vision Pro from a few weeks ago, where he said, the Quest will be the open platform. The Quest is the open platform. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? There's nothing about the Meta Quest that is currently open. It's as vertically, contained as the Apple Vision Pro. And what I think the argument could be, and what I think Zuckerberg probably meant, was the ability to do things on the Quest platform outside of what we consider to be the walled garden of Apple land, right? That you would be able to sideload applications and or package files, which you can already do because it's essentially just Android, and Meta allows you to do that currently. And that was after a bit of difficulty over time, I think, because Meta was attacking or trying to compete against the existing PC VR market, right? They had the Oculus. Oculus did well as a physical, hardware platform, but it was pretty quickly determined on the PC side that the marketplace that was going to win PC gaming was Steam, just because that's where everybody who plays video games on PC is already purchasing their applications and their games. That didn't change. Oculus tried on the desktop to win over the PC VR kind of platform sales game, and they lost. And they ended up kind of just giving up entirely on that aspect when they moved to the Quest. They had tried to suggest when the Quest 1 came out that they would support both, and within months they had kind of dropped the ball on that and just said, okay, we're doing our own thing. If you want to buy games on the Quest, like an Apple Store model, you could only buy them at the time from Meta. Fairly soon after, they did open things up, and through Oculus Link and a couple of other third-party tools as well, you can now play your Steam library from your PC and basically broadcast that over your local network to the headset. And they did that because for larger AAA VR gaming titles like Half-Life Alyx, those were going to be found on Steam because that's where the market was. And I think that Meta has successfully kind of created their own marketplace on mobile in a way that Apple has with the iPhone, and they're not likely to give that up. I think that they're trying to keep people within the garden as much as they can, and building out not only an operating system but a marketplace that has studios and games that exist for it, which Meta has been spending years on. That's one of the major complaints against the rest of the PC VR, is that Oculus gets most of the game exclusives because they've been paying for them. I think they're not likely to want to give that up, and the likelihood that someone else will attempt to compete with Meta in that ballpark, it's not going to happen. I mean, I already think that Apple and Meta have kind of won before the race has even begun, because building all that out is so difficult, and the market share right now is so tiny that there's not really room for anyone else. And so I think that Samsung will likely come with their tail between their legs to Meta saying, hey, we've got a headset. How can we work with you on this to make this, the next Quest, rather than, hey, can we sell this headset independent of you, but utilize your operating system? I don't know. I think that obviously the platform is what's going to win the game more than the hardware itself.
Yeah, agreed.
But I don't think that Meta is hurting for hardware as much as hardware makers are hurting for software.
Great point. Anshul.
I just wanted to add to Quinn's point. Meta has successfully won the PC with the Quest 2. They have 40% market share on PC now through Quest Link. So they went around it and found their way in through another route. But they still dominated the PC eventually, and the Quest 3 is about to pass their own headset. So Meta will have 1 and 2 positions on PC and have actual mass market control there. I think there's really not much that I think they will be able to. The truth is, I think they'll be able to do it. There's a possibility they could do it inside 12 months. But I think the reality is there isn't enough reason for them to commit enough resources to do it inside 12 months. So I think if a reason pops up to justify them to make that change happen faster, they will. But as I see it today, they probably won't do it inside 12 months. But to Quinn's point, I think it is going to happen. And it's because I think they just want their store to be the default destination.
Agreed.
And that's more important to them than having platform exclusivity. And I mean, that's kind of been their vision all along. They just want to get as many headsets on their store as they can, because that's how they drive profitability. And yeah, I just think I don't think Google and Samsung are as much of a threat as some people think they are, especially when you consider that both companies entered the market early and exited early. So they've burned a lot of bridges, and there isn't that much confidence in their product. And Samsung announced their partnership with Google over a year ago, and we've basically gotten nothing out of that announcement since then. So, um, you know, they had CES, they had Unpacked, they had MWC. So, um, maybe in the fall we'll actually see something. But in general, I just think that they've already kind of evaporated most of the goodwill that they gained by making that announcement.
Mm,
And as a result, I don't think it's going to put that much pressure on Meta.
yeah. Okay. Max.
I think I think I'm taking the under. I think it's going to be less than 12 months, but I don't know if we'll actually see products launch with a Meta store or that platform available. But I think maybe we'll get an announcement at Meta does a developer conference in the summer, right? Maybe, hey, this is an open platform. Partners can come to us and develop for the Meta platform. Or the other option is they take advantage of Android being relatively open and provide the Quest store as a side loadable APK on other Android, Google, Samsung based headsets. So it kind of becomes like the Amazon App Store, but on Samsung's headset. So you can buy a Samsung headset, it comes preloaded with Google Play, then you just install the Meta app. So you kind of get that dual platform approach where they're still getting the sales, they don't have to worry about the hardware. And all they need to do is make sure developers update their apps to support the Android everything and the Meta everything. Quest OS is still based on Android, Android's Android. Realistically, it's just an app update or software developers compiling for the correct version. So there's a few ways they can do it. Don't have to worry about the software, the hardware, and don't have to really worry about the other platforms as much. And it seems more realistic to provide an app store or open up their OS to other vendors in like hey, we're starting to do this way. Or even maybe in the future you see Samsung launch two versions of the headset, one with Google Android and one with Quest Android.
Mm. So I chose 12 months on intentionally for us to tease out how much time Meta thinks they have, to Anshul's point about pressure. Because I struggle with this too. I genuinely curious just how fast they think they need to move in order to keep pace with whatever momentum's developing, right? And then to some degree, this looming idea that Android's going to do something here, right? With partners that should be working with Meta. And you have to think they don't want to wait longer than a year. So on the basis of, I think we'll see headsets from other people than Meta. I don't know what operating systems this is going to run. It would be logical for it to be Quest, but I'm also taking the over just on that basis that I don't think they feel enough pressure, and I think building a platform, even though it's a fork for other, is very hard, and I'm just not sure, to the point of resources being there, that they could even pull that off if they wanted to in 12 months. But I do hope they get their crap together and prove us all wrong, except for Max, who's taking the under, because I do think this needs to happen, right? And I think this is the philosophical question I kind of want to address here is, I think we would all agree someone needs to be the horizontal platform here. Someone needs to be the Windows and the Android of mixed reality. Is that going to, I mean, I'm just curious. I'm sort of logging this up. Do you think that will be Meta? You guys have alluded to that you think they've won. Or will Facebook decide to remain, like, I guess I'm asking, does Facebook acknowledge that point? Yeah, we should be the Android or Windows. I don't actually know. Maybe they do. But if it's not them, someone else has to do it.
I mean, who are devs going to trust more, Google or Facebook? That kind of is where, if they do it, it goes into that. I have no clue. I have no clue. It
I
seems like a
also
lot of
think
people just
that
dislike both.
I think that a lot of yeah, I think that's a good point. A lot of people do dislike both for different reasons, right? Like, some devs don't trust Google because they kill things too fast,
Right.
and other devs don't like Meta because they'll just go in and build the exact same thing you did and then destroy your app because they can.
Right.
Or they'll just, they're just very unfriendly towards a lot of developers who were afraid to speak up until Vision Pro came out, right? Like
Right. Right.
they were like, we don't have an alternative to do what we do until Apple Vision Pro came out, and then they're like, oh yeah, Meadows sucks to work with. We don't want to work with them anymore. We're going to just work with Apple. So I think there's just a lot of um, bad blood on both the Android and the Meta side with developers. Um, And Apple's not necessarily doing the greatest job either, for a lot of reasons. But in the XR space, they haven't really pissed
Yeah.
that many people off yet. So, I feel like Apple actually has an opportunity, a better opportunity to be a horizontal player, but they're not going to be because that's
Mm.
not how they work.
Yep.
This concerns me though, because somebody's got to get their crap together. I mean, I feel like there's a whole host of hardware OEMs who are like, we'd love to do something. People seem excited about this category. We'd love to take our spin on it, tie it to Windows, make it an enterprise product, something. And I just worry that this is going to be a big roadblock. It's
I think people will go with Google because they just don't see a path with Meta. Um, and they will do it cautiously. And I think that will slow the market because they won't they they want to work with Google, but they don't trust Google. And they know how to work with Google, but the problem is that Google just kills things too fast.
Google should have the best shot of anyone, but I truly think they need an executive leadership change for that to actually happen.
ooh, striking,
I
striking scathe.
yeah, I think Meta has a good shot only because in response to Apple, if they respond appropriately, I think it's easier for Meta to emulate what Apple has done thus far
Okay.
than vice versa.
Okay.
And so I think if they play their cards well and they expand and because they're built on Android, right? So if they expand compatibility with Android devices and they continue to make native supported, Windows, and heck, they could do it Mac OS level. I mean, there's a bunch of utilities that exist that allow you to screencast your Mac to the Quest. If they take that kind of vertical that makes the Apple Vision Pro so unique and special and copy it at the lower price point they're at, I think that they might be able to chase out the market even with a less ideal experience faster than Apple can bring a cheaper headset to market. But they've got to work quick, and I'm not confident they will.
You also made me think of something that I forgot about Meta. They transferred their entire platform over to OpenXR. So
Yeah.
everything's OpenXR. So
Yep.
theoretically, anybody who's OpenXR would be more likely to be compatible with what they're already doing. I know it's not just, wave a hand and OpenXR works, but it's way more cross-platform compatible than anything anybody else has been doing so far.
I think I
But I
saw
think
Unreal also dropped support for everything. It's now just OpenXR as well, Unreal Engine.
Okay. But the point that I think we're all making, right, which comes down to platform, is this is a battle for the App Store, right? This is what should Google and Facebook come to some agreement. The battle is going to be who gets the App Store revenue. Is it Meta's App Store or is it Google's App Store? Like that's going to be the heart of this, and that will be an interesting thing to play out. And like I said, I think they've got to work this out sooner than later. I think it would hurt the opportunity here for it to slow down, and that's been my concern with this, right, from a philosophical standpoint. So good thoughts there. Okay, I'm going to jump to the last question to since we kind of alluded to it, which was price. So philosophical of technology. So let's take the over under that Apple will someday get the price of Apple Vision Pro below $1,500. Quinn.
Yeah, I'll go for this one. I think it's an inevitability if they anticipate to have any market adoption. People continue to say, and I think it's erroneous, but people continue to say that the current Vision Pro is just a dev kit. I understand the spirit of what they're saying. Obviously, they're not going to advertise a dev kit during the Super Bowl, but I do understand the idea that this is a new platform. They're trying to get people excited about it, but they're very well aware that this is not a mass market object yet, and that they are pushing to have these experiences for AR developed, because I think the polish of Apple Vision Pro is Vision OS. I don't think it's the hardware, and I don't think it's the third-party app support. They need to bring those other two categories down to the polish that the OS has. But the fundamental concepts, just as with the first iPhone, are there. And it's not until they lower that price that they'll be able to see greater market adoption. But I think they're aware that it needs to happen, and to happen quickly if there's any likelihood that this is going to become a viable thing rather than just an expensive Mac accessory.
Right.
And so I would bet that all the rumors that point to a less expensive headset coming out fairly soon, or and soon, I mean within the next 2-3 years, are an inevitability, frankly.
Yeah. So you think they'll get under $1,500?
I think they have to.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
think they're going to be 500. They're not going to compete with the
Sure.
Quest 3.
Agreed.
But
Agreed.
I think it can be at a price point that's accessible enough, and they can have experiences exciting enough that they might be able to encourage people that are in the, well, maybe I get this over a MacBook Air or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Max, over under 1,500.
I think they'll go over, but I'm saying 2,000. I think 2,000 is the sweet spot for them. I think they'll probably aim for that, because there's really two options with it. It's make the experience worse, or, well, three. Make the experience worse, eat into margin, or hope the price of similar but worse parts come down. Right? I think margin and just pulling away are more where they will go for, but I don't think they can get down to 1,500 doing that realistically. What they'll aim for, and what's economically viable for the company with their historically massive margins and what will look good on Wall Street and to everything for building the platform, I don't think they can hit 1,500 within the next 5 years, just based on scale and everything else that goes into it. I think 2,000 they could probably hit if they eat into a margin a little bit more than they're probably comfortable doing, and get rid of things like eyesight, maybe slightly lower quality displays, less cameras, A series chip rather than M series. I think they could do it, but I think 1,500 is just way too low for them. Even if they might want to, I mean, as everyone has probably agreed, 1,500 is a good sweet spot to get more consumers interested. I just think from a technology perspective and financial perspective, they would be hesitant to do it and probably try to aim for like 1,800 to 2,000 instead.
All right. Anshul?
I think it will be over, but ever so slightly. One of my first thoughts when I put the Vision Pro on was, this would be really good if it was like half the price. You know what I mean? Like, it would sell.
Yeah.
I think it would sell a lot better if it was just
right.
halvesies, right? And I think that thought still sticks with me, because I think the value and the utility is a lot better at 1,700-ish.
Okay.
And I'm obviously 1,500 is close enough that like I could almost say under, right? But I think, to Max's point, the bill of materials is still not quite there yet, and I'm not sure we will get there. And ideally, it would be an AR device, not a VR device masquerading as an AR device.
Right.
But I really believe that there is an opportunity for something that's a little bit maybe less heavyweight. I'm not a big believer in the eyesight feature, and I think it's a big cost add that doesn't really add much value. So I think there are opportunities to reduce costs and weight, and I think weight is a factor. And I think that there is an opportunity to get this to $1,500, but I do think it's a stretch in so many different ways for Apple that I don't think they will hit it initially. And maybe they ship an 8 gig model. That's how they do it to get it to $1,500. But I just think that if they hit $1,500, it's going to be the absolute min spec, bare bones, and I'm not sure that's going to be a good experience.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. I, though, am gonna go with Quinn on this one, and I'm gonna say just barely under. And my approach to this is purely philosophical, in that when a category is not subsidized. So if you just look at, if they view this like Mac, right? If they view this as a non-subsidized category, again, it's not a gigantic market unless they got under, like you said, right, Quinn, 500, 700. It's the only way they would reach significant scale of whatever the market is. I do think that we will get technologies where the trade-offs aren't as bad to get close to that price point. And I think it comes back to like what Max said, which I agree is going to be a margin discussion. But as we know, Apple pressures suppliers heavily, more so than anybody else, to get their margins down. And I think they would want to hit that 13.99, and maybe just under, right? 14.99, which I would say is under, even if it's 15. But because it would be necessary in line with how they would think about the Mac, right? Now, the argument, the counter argument to myself, which I'll also make, is Anshul's point, which is that eventually they want to be in AR. But I do think they might still want this product as a category, because maybe that's the Mac replacement, right? Maybe it replaces your TV and it replaces something else. At which point, then I think they just keep it high, if that's their philosophy, that they think they could get AR at 1,200 in 20 years, whenever we believe that might be a real product. But that would be the balance, right? Don't try to make us a computer on your face versus the smartphone AR more mobile thing in the same price ranges, because I don't think they'd sell either of those under $1,000 ever. So that's my own counter. But this is where I kind of want to jump into this particular topic. Like, how do you think both these companies will take these trade-offs, right? So, for example, do you think that Meta will try to get into the $1,500 price range, 12 to 15 price range, or a Meta partner? So you do. So I think what we're saying is, again, right, to have the minimum experience that is a compute, entertainment, high fidelity pass through. It's just going to be really hard to get that at any experience under $1,000, like Anshul said, if ever, let alone anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Vision Pro is a product segment of, delivering the best that they can offer.
Right.
And I think others want to do that as well. But I think that it's a limited market size. And I think that there's going to be appetite for a more affordable, lighter weight, more compact solution. And that will maybe be lower resolution, maybe slightly lower performance, but it's more accessible. And both of these will kind of create the device base for developers to build more spatial apps and potentially build more AR apps, so that then when people build actual AR headsets, there's actually an application base to build off of, which is kind of what they did with the Vision Pro, right? They like kind of built on the iPad as an application base to make it more useful. And I think that's what they might have to do with these headsets to make the AR headsets more of a viable platform, because nobody wants to use a device that doesn't have apps for it.
Yeah.
I think Meta just has to meet the threshold of being good enough.
Right.
Because they've already demonstrated that they're willing to have, if not a loss leader, a break-even product, where Apple has not yet demonstrated they're willing to do that, right? And so the likelihood that Meta can capture a market that Apple's unwilling to is fairly high in my mind. And as long as the baseline expectation of performance is suitable for what the market requires, then I think it'll work out. I mean, if you look at televisions, for example, most people own garbage $500 TCL TVs from Amazon, and they don't care because it's good enough. I don't think we're yet even on the high end at that good enough yet level. But I think it is forthcoming, if not in the next 5 years, certainly within the next 10. And we might see a product line where sub $1,000, there are things that are good enough for most people.
Okay. That's a good point. All right. Well, this has been a rich discussion for our first episode of the Over Under. I appreciate all of your time. Thanks for guesting with us. And Quinn, people can follow you at Twitter at Snazzy Labs, right?
Yep. I'm on Snazzy Labs at Twitter, and then youtube.com/snazzy.
Yeah. Anshul, people can find you on Twitter and your publications at More Insights and at Forbes, right?
Yeah, I'm Anshul Sag everywhere. TikTok, YouTube,
everywhere.
Mastodon, you name it. Blue Sky.
Consistency. Yep. It's good.
And you can find Max and I at Creative Strategies and on Twitter at Max Weinbach and at Ben Beharan. Appreciate your time, guys, and we'll talk to you next time.
Cheers.
Thank you.